The champagne glass slipped from Natalie's fingers the moment she realized who she'd been trash-talking to for the past 20 minutes. The man she'd just called everything wrong with corporate America was now standing on stage, smiling at a room full of people who would destroy her career with a single phone call. Adrian Cole, billionaire, CEO. And apparently, the stranger who'd been listening to every word she'd said about his company being built on lies. If you want to see how badly one conversation can destroy everything, or maybe, just maybe, change it, stick around until the end. And hey, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. You won't believe what happens next. Natalie Hayes had learned a long time ago that the best way to survive was to stay invisible. Not literally invisible, of course. She showed up. She did her job. She answered emails within the hour and never missed a deadline. But she'd perfected the art of being just forgettable enough that no one looked too closely. No one asked questions. No one expected anything beyond what she could safely deliver while keeping her head down and her bank account barely above zero. At 30 years old, she'd become an expert at blending into beige office walls. The Sterling Global Corporate Gala was not the kind of place where people like Natalie belonged. It was the kind of event where champagne cost more per bottle than she made in a week, where women wore dresses that required a second mortgage, and where the men spoke in a language of mergers and acquisitions that might as well have been ancient Greek. She'd only been invited because someone in HR had sent mass email to the entire marketing department, and her supervisor had made it clear that optional meant your career depends on it. So here she was, wearing a dress she'd bought on clearance 3 years ago, sitting at a table near the back, nursing a glass of water because even the cheapest drink at the bar would wreck her budget for the week. The ballroom was ridiculous. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling so high it made her neck hurt to look up. The tables were draped in white silk, centerpieces exploding with flowers she couldn't name. A string quartet played somewhere she couldn't see, the music floating over the low hum of conversation and laughter. Everyone here looked comfortable, easy, like they'd been born knowing which fork to use and how to laugh at jokes that weren't funny. Natalie felt like she was wearing a sign that said, "Doesn't belong here," in neon letters. She'd spent the first hour avoiding eye contact, pretending to check her phone, and picking at a salad that was mostly decorative. Her table mates, mid-level managers she vaguely recognized from other departments, had given up trying to include her in their conversation about vacation homes and private schools. She was fine with that. She didn't have anything to contribute anyway. She was about to fake a headache and leave when the seat next to her pulled out. "Mind if I sit?" Natalie looked up. The man standing there was tall, maybe early 30s, with dark hair that looked deliberately unstyled in that way that probably cost a fortune. He wore a suit that fit him like it had been made specifically for his body, which it probably had. But his tie was loosened, his expression calm, and he didn't have that look most of the men here had. That look like they were calculating your net worth while shaking your hand. Sure, Natalie said, because what else was she supposed to say? He sat down, leaning back in his chair like he had nowhere else to be. He didn't immediately try to make conversation, which was a relief. He just glanced around the room with the kind of casual interest that suggested he wasn't particularly impressed by any of it. Natalie went back to her phone. "First time at one of these?" She looked up. He was watching her, but not in a weird way, just curious. "That obvious?" she asked. "Little bit." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that didn't feel rehearsed. "You looked like you were about to bolt." "I was considering it." "Can't say I blame you. These things are exhausting." Natalie blinked. She hadn't expected honesty. Most people at events like this spent the entire night pretending they were having the time of their lives. "You don't seem like you're having a terrible time," she said carefully. "I'm good at pretending." He tilted his head. "You're not." "Is that a compliment or an insult?" Observation. A waiter appeared with a tray of champagne. The man took 2 glasses, handing one to Natalie before she could protest. "I'm drinking water," she said. "Now you're drinking champagne." She looked at the glass, then at him. He was still smiling, but there was something disarming about it. Like he wasn't trying to impress her or sell her anything. Like he was just a guy at a boring event trying to make it less boring. Against her better judgment, Natalie took the glass. "So what do you do?" he asked. "Marketing," she said. "Low level. Very low level. I mostly write copy for email campaigns that no one reads." "Bet people read them." The open rate suggests otherwise. He laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that made his shoulders shake slightly. Natalie found herself relaxing, just a fraction. "What about you?" she asked. "I work here too." "Doing what?" "Bit of everything." He swirled his champagne. "Mostly trying to keep things from falling apart." "Good luck with that." "Yeah." He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "You don't seem like a fan of the company." Natalie froze. She'd said too much. She always said too much when she let her guard down, and now she'd insulted the company to a stranger who probably knew someone who could get her fired. "I didn't mean—" "Relax." He held up a hand. "I'm not HR. Still what? I shouldn't talk about work like that." "Why not?" "Because I like having a paycheck." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table. "What would you say," he asked slowly, "if you weren't worried about your paycheck?" Natalie should have changed the subject, should have made an excuse and left, should have done literally anything other than what she did next. But the champagne was good and she was tired, and for some reason this stranger felt safe in a way most people didn't. "Honestly," she said. "Honestly. I think this company is built on marketing bullshit." His eyebrows went up. "Keep going." "I'm serious. We sell this image of innovation and integrity and changing the world, but half the campaigns I work on are just empty. We're not selling products. We're selling a feeling, and it's fake." "You think the products are bad?" "I think the products are fine. I think the promises are lies." She expected him to argue, to defend the company, to get uncomfortable and make an excuse to leave. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Go on." And so she did, because apparently Natalie Hayes had lost her mind. She told him about the campaigns that promised sustainability while the company cut corners on manufacturing, about the diversity initiatives that were just PR stunts with no real follow-through, about the executive emails that talked about family values while people on her level worked 60-hour weeks and couldn't afford rent. She told him things she'd never said out loud, things she'd barely admitted to herself, and he listened. Really listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend, didn't try to spin it. He just sat there, his expression thoughtful, occasionally asking a question that made her dig deeper. "So why do you stay?" he asked finally. Natalie laughed, but it came out bitter. "Because I'm broke, because jobs are hard to find, because I've got student loans and medical bills and a car that's one breakdown away from the junkyard. I stay because I don't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice. Not everyone has good ones." He didn't argue with that. The lights dimmed slightly. Someone tapped a microphone on stage. The program was starting. "Guess that's our cue to pretend we care," Natalie muttered. The man smiled faintly. Then he stood, adjusting his tie. "Thanks for the conversation," he said. "It was refreshing." "Yeah, you too." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd near the stage. Natalie settled back in her chair, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. It was nice, talking to someone who didn't make her feel crazy for noticing the things everyone else ignored. The CEO of Sterling Global was about to give his annual address. Natalie barely paid attention as the host introduced him, rattling off accomplishments and accolades she'd heard 100 times. She was already planning her exit strategy. Another 10 minutes, and she could please welcome Adrian Cole. The applause was deafening. Natalie looked up, and her entire world tilted sideways. The man walking onto the stage, waving to the crowd with that same easy confidence, was the man who'd been sitting next to her. The man she'd spent the last 20 minutes telling that his company was built on lies. Her champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It didn't break. It just hit the table with a dull thud, champagne pooling across the white silk. Someone at her table glanced over, annoyed. Natalie didn't notice. She was too busy staring at the stage, at Adrian Cole, billionaire, CEO, single father, self-made legend, smiling at a room full of people who would do anything he asked. Her stomach dropped. She just told the most powerful man in the company exactly what she thought of him, in detail, with examples. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Adrian said, his voice smooth and confident. He didn't look at her, didn't even glance in her direction. This company wouldn't exist without the people in this room, And I mean that. Natalie's hands were shaking. This was it. She was done. She'd be fired by Monday, maybe sooner. Maybe someone was already drafting the email. She needed to leave. Now. She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. A few people glanced at her, but she didn't care. She grabbed her purse and headed for the exit, weaving between tables, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She made it to the hallway before she had to stop and lean against the wall, pressing her palms to her eyes. Stupid. She was so stupid. She'd finally let her guard down, and it had cost her everything. Tiitikan. And it had. Natalie didn't cry. She didn't have the energy. She just stood there, trying to figure out how she was going to pay rent when she was unemployed. Behind her, Adrian Cole's voice echoed through the ballroom, talking about vision and values and the future of the company. All Natalie could think was that she didn't have a future here anymore. She pushed off the wall and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. She didn't look back. Natalie spent the entire weekend convinced she was going to be fired. She didn't sleep. She barely ate. She sat on her couch in her tiny apartment, staring at her phone, waiting for the email that would destroy her life. It didn't come. Monday morning arrived, gray and cold. Natalie dragged herself to the office, her stomach in knots. She half expected security to stop her at the door, but they waved her through without a second glance. Her desk looked exactly the same. Her computer still worked. Her coworkers ignored her, same as always. By lunchtime, she started to think maybe she'd gotten away with it. Maybe Adrian Cole had already forgotten about her. Maybe he talked to so many people that one brutally honest conversation didn't even register. She was almost starting to relax when her phone buzzed. An email. From Adrian Cole's office. Her hands went numb. She opened it. Ms. Hayes, Mr. Cole would like to meet with you today at 4 p.m. Please report to the executive floor. Regards, J. Park, Executive Assistant to the CEO. Natalie read it 3 times. Then she put her head down on her desk and tried not to throw up. The executive floor was nothing like the rest of the building. Down in marketing, the carpet was worn and the walls were beige and the break room coffee tasted like regret. Up here, everything was glass and steel and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her car. The receptionist was polished and professional, her smile the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Ms. Hayes? Natalie nodded, not trusting her voice. Mr. Cole is ready for you. Follow me. They walked down a hallway lined with abstract art that Natalie didn't understand. The receptionist stopped in front of a heavy wooden door and knocked once. Come in. Natalie's stomach flipped. The receptionist opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Adrian Cole's office was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the skyline stretching out like something from a movie. His desk was clean, almost empty, just a laptop and a single-framed photo she couldn't see from where she stood. Adrian was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the view. He turned when she walked in. Ms. Hayes, he said. Thanks for coming. Natalie's mouth was dry. Did I have a choice? A faint smile. Not really. He gestured to one of the chairs in front of his desk. Natalie sat, gripping her purse like it was a lifeline. Adrian didn't sit. He stayed by the window, studying her with that same calm, unreadable expression he'd had at the gala. I'm assuming, he said slowly, that you've spent the last few days thinking you're about to be fired. Natalie didn't answer. She didn't need to. You're not, he said. She blinked. I'm not? No? Then why am I here? Adrian finally moved, walking over to his desk. He didn't sit down, just leaned against it, arms crossed. Because you said something at the gala that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Natalie's pulse spiked. Look, I didn't know who you were. I know. I was out of line. Were you? She stopped. Adrian tilted his head, watching her. You said this company is built on marketing bullshit. You said we make promises we don't keep. You said people like you work 60-hour weeks and can't afford rent, while executives talk about family values. Natalie felt her face go hot. I shouldn't have... Were you lying? The question caught her off guard. What? Were you lying, Wasul? He repeated. Was anything you said untrue? She stared at him. This had to be a trap. She swallowed. No, I wasn't lying. Then why are you apologizing? Because you're my boss. I'm your CEO, he corrected. And the fact that you think that means you can't tell me the truth is part of the problem. Natalie didn't know what to say to that. Adrian straightened, walking around his desk. He picked up the framed photo. Natalie caught a glimpse of a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, grinning at the camera, and set it back down gently. I built this company from nothing, he said quietly. I was 23, broke, sleeping on a friend's couch. I had an idea, and no money, and no connections. Everyone said I'd fail. Natalie stayed silent. I didn't fail, Adrian continued, but somewhere along the way I stopped paying attention to the things that mattered. I hired people to handle the details. I trusted them to stay honest, and I didn't ask enough questions. He looked at her. You asked the right questions. Natalie's breath caught. I don't need people who tell me what I want to hear, Adrian said. I've got a building full of those. What I need is someone who'll tell me the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. He paused. I need someone like you. Natalie felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. I don't understand, she managed. I'm launching a new initiative, Adrian said. Transparency, accountability, real change, not just PR spin. I want someone to lead it, someone who actually believes in it. He looked at her steadily. I want you. Natalie's mind went blank. You're offering me a job? A leadership position. You'd report directly to me, full authority to audit our marketing, our operations, our promises. If we're lying, I want to know, and I want you to fix it. This had to be a dream. Or a breakdown. Why me? Natalie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because you're not trying to impress me. You're not trying to climb a ladder, you just want things to be honest. He smiled faintly. That's rare. Natalie sat there, frozen, trying to process what was happening. This didn't make sense. People like her didn't get opportunities like this. People like her stayed invisible. I don't have the experience, she said finally. You have something better. You give a damn. People are going to hate me. Probably. I could fail. You could. She looked at him, searching his face for the catch. The angle. The thing that would make this make sense. Why are you really doing this? She asked. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up the photo again, his expression softening. Because my daughter's going to grow up in the world this company helps shape, he said quietly, and I want her to grow up in a world that's better than the one I inherited, that starts with being honest about where we are now. He set the photo down. So what do you say, Ms. Hayes? You want to help me fix this place? Or do you want to go back to writing email copy no one reads? Natalie's hands were shaking. She thought about her tiny apartment, her student loans, her car that barely ran. She thought about every time she'd bitten her tongue, every time she'd made herself smaller, every time she'd convinced herself that staying invisible was the same as staying safe. And then she thought about the look on Adrian Cole's face when she'd told him the truth, the way he'd listened, really listened. She took a breath. Okay, she said. Adrian smiled. Yeah? Yeah, good. He extended his hand. Welcome to the team. Natalie shook it, her grip firmer than she expected. She had no idea what she'd just agreed to. But for the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The first thing Natalie learned about her new position was that nobody wanted her to have it. She found out on her third day, when she walked into what was supposed to be her first leadership meeting, and the room went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from respect or curiosity. The kind that comes from people who've already decided you don't belong. There were 8 of them sitting around the conference table. Senior executives, all at least a decade older than her, all wearing expressions that ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. At the head of the table sat Victoria Kane, Senior Vice President of Operations, a woman in her mid-40s with silver hair cut sharp as a knife and a smile that didn't move past her lips. You must be Natalie, Victoria said, her voice smooth and cold. Please, sit. Natalie sat in the only empty chair, which happened to be at the far end of the table, as far from Victoria as possible. She could feel every eye on her, measuring, judging, finding her lacking. We were just discussing the new transparency initiative, Victoria continued, folding her hands on the table. Adrian seems to think we need an overhaul of our entire marketing strategy. I'm sure you have thoughts. It wasn't a question. It was a test. Natalie had prepared for this. She'd spent the last 2 nights going through every campaign the company had run in the past 5 years, cross-referencing claims with actual data, flagging inconsistencies. She had a presentation ready, statistics memorized, a plan that she actually believed could work. But sitting here, looking at Victoria's cold smile and the skeptical faces around the table, all of that preparation felt flimsy, inadequate. "I think," Natalie said carefully, "that we need to start by being honest about where we are. Not where we want to be, where we actually are." A man to her left, she thought his name was Richard, snorted, "And where do you think we are? Making promises we're not keeping." The room got colder. "That's a serious accusation," Victoria said, her voice sharper now. "Do you have evidence?" Natalie pulled out her tablet, hands steadier than she expected. She brought up the first slide of her presentation and turned it so they could see. "Last quarter, we ran a campaign promising carbon-neutral shipping within 6 months. It's been 8 months. We're not even close." "Supply chain issues," Richard said dismissively. "Everyone's dealing with that." "Then we shouldn't have made the promise. So your solution is to just stop making ambitious goals?" Victoria leaned forward. "That's not leadership. That's cowardice." Natalie felt her face flush, but she didn't back down. "My solution is to make goals we can actually meet, or at least be transparent when we can't. Transparency doesn't sell products. Neither does losing customer trust." Victoria's smile finally dropped. "You've been here less than a week, and you think you understand this company better than people who've built it for decades?" "I understand what it looks like from the outside." "And what does it look like?" Natalie met her eyes. "Like we're more interested in looking good than being good." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Victoria laughed. It was a sharp, humorless sound that made Natalie's skin prickle. "Well," Victoria said, standing up, "this has been enlightening. Thank you for your input, Natalie. We'll certainly take it under advisement." The meeting was over. Just like that. The other executives filed out, not looking at Natalie, not saying a word. Victoria was the last to leave, pausing at the door. "A word of advice," she said, her voice low enough that only Natalie could hear. "Adrian may have given you this position, but that doesn't mean anyone here has to make it easy for you. If you're smart, you'll figure out how things actually work around here before you try to change them." Then she was gone. Natalie sat alone in the empty conference room, her heart pounding, her presentation still pulled up on her tablet, untouched, unheard. She'd just made an enemy, maybe several. She gathered her things and headed back to her new office, a small room on the executive floor that still felt too big, too exposed. She closed the door and leaned against it, pressing her palms to her eyes. This was a mistake. She wasn't ready for this. She didn't know what she was doing. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. How'd it go? She frowned, then realized. Adrian must have given her his personal number when she signed the paperwork. She'd saved it, but hadn't expected him to actually use it. She typed back, "Great. I think Victoria Kane wants me dead." The response came almost immediately. "She wanted the last person in your position dead too. You're in good company." Despite everything, Natalie almost smiled. What happened to them? They quit. Her stomach sank. That's encouraging. You're not going to quit. How do you know? Because you're still there. Natalie stared at the phone for a long moment. Then she put it down and got back to work. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Natalie had expected resistance, but she hadn't expected sabotage. Small things at first. Emails that didn't get forwarded, meetings she wasn't invited to, reports that went missing from shared drives. Nothing she could prove, nothing she could call out, but enough to slow her down, to make her second-guess everything. She started working longer hours, coming in early, staying late, trying to catch up on everything she didn't know. Her apartment became a place she only went to sleep, and even that was sporadic. She lived on coffee and vending machine snacks and sheer stubbornness. Adrian checked in occasionally. A text here, a brief conversation in the hallway there. He never asked if she was okay. He just asked what she needed, and when she told him, he made it happen. Access to files, clearance for audits, the authority to ask questions people didn't want to answer. It helped, but it also made the target on her back bigger. One night, 3 weeks into her new role, Natalie was still at her desk at 9 p.m. when someone knocked on her door. She looked up, exhausted, expecting maybe a janitor. It was Adrian. He was still in his suit, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looked tired too, but he smiled when he saw her. "You're still here. So are you. I live upstairs." He nodded toward the ceiling, the penthouse suite. "Of course. What's your excuse?" "I'm behind on everything." "You've been here 3 weeks. You're supposed to be behind." Natalie rubbed her eyes. "That's not very reassuring." Adrian stepped into her office, glancing at the papers spread across her desk, the half-empty coffee cup, the presentation she'd been rebuilding for the 4th time. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't from a vending machine?" She couldn't remember. "Come on," he said. "Where?" "Dinner." "I have work. It'll still be here in an hour. Come on." He didn't wait for her to argue, just turned and walked toward the elevator. Natalie hesitated, then grabbed her jacket and followed. They ended up at a small diner 3 blocks from the office. The kind of place with vinyl booths and a laminated menu and a waitress who called everyone "Hun." Adrian slid into a booth near the back like he'd done it 100 times. Natalie sat across from him, feeling out of place in her work clothes, while he looked completely comfortable in his probably $5,000 suit. "You come here often?" she asked. "More than you'd think." He glanced at the menu, even though he clearly didn't need to. "The coffee's terrible, but the pancakes are perfect." "It's 9 p.m. Breakfast doesn't have a schedule." The waitress came over, poured them both coffee without asking, and took their orders. Pancakes for Adrian. A burger for Natalie, because she couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real meal. When the waitress left, Adrian leaned back in the booth, studying her. "You look exhausted." "I am exhausted." "Good." She blinked. "Good? If you weren't exhausted, you wouldn't be doing it right." Natalie didn't know what to say to that. "Victoria's making your life difficult," Adrian said. It wasn't a question. "How'd you know?" "Because that's what Victoria does. She's good at her job, but she doesn't like change, and she really doesn't like people she didn't hire." "Why don't you fire her?" "Because she's good at her job," Adrian repeated, "and because firing someone every time they disagree with me would make me a terrible leader." "Even if they're sabotaging your initiatives? Is that what she's doing?" Natalie hesitated. She didn't have proof, just suspicions, missing emails and convenient miscommunications. "I don't know," she admitted. Adrian nodded slowly. "If you get proof, tell me. Until then, assume she's just skeptical and work around it." That's easier said than done. Most things are. The food came. Natalie hadn't realized how hungry she was until she took the first bite. She made herself slow down, even though she wanted to inhale the entire burger in 30 seconds. Adrian watched her with something that might have been amusement. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. It's just nice to see someone enjoy food. When's the last time you enjoyed food?" He thought about it. "Probably this morning. My daughter made me toast. She used an entire stick of butter." Natalie smiled despite herself. "How old is she?" 7, almost 8. She's convinced she's going to be a chef when she grows up." "That's sweet." "It's expensive. She goes through ingredients like they're free." There was warmth in his voice when he talked about her, a softness that didn't match the CEO persona everyone saw. "It must be hard," Natalie said carefully. "Doing this alone." Adrian's expression shifted, just slightly. "It's not alone. I've got help, a nanny, a driver, a whole support system. But, yeah, sometimes it's hard. Do you ever regret it? The company, I mean, taking on this much." "Every day." He said it without hesitation. "But I don't regret her, and I don't regret trying to build something that matters." He looked at her. "That's why I hired you, because you actually care if it matters." Natalie felt something tighten in her chest. She wasn't used to people seeing her as anything other than forgettable. "I'm probably going to screw this up," she said quietly. "Probably," Adrian agreed. "But you'll screw it up honestly. That's more than most people can say." They finished eating. Adrian paid, waving off her protest. They walked back to the office in comfortable silence, the city quiet around them. At the elevator, Adrian stopped. "You're going to be fine," he said. "You don't know that." "I do, actually." He hit the button for the elevator. "You're tougher than you think. You just haven't had a reason to find out yet." The elevator doors opened. Natalie stepped inside, then turned. "Thank you," she said. "For dinner. And for not firing me yet." Adrian smiled. Give it time. The doors closed. Natalie rode up to her floor, feeling steadier than she had in weeks. She went back to her office and got back to work. The presentation was scheduled for 6 weeks out. A full board meeting where Natalie would lay out her findings, her recommendations, and her plan for implementing real transparency across the company's marketing and operations. It was the most important presentation of her life, and she knew it. She also knew that people were waiting for her to fail. Victoria, especially. Natalie saw her around the office occasionally, always perfectly composed, always surrounded by people who hung on her every word. She never acknowledged Natalie directly, but Natalie could feel her watching, calculating. 4 weeks before the presentation, Natalie got her first real break. She'd been digging through shipping records, cross-referencing them with the public claims the company had made about sustainability. The numbers didn't match, not even close. They'd promised carbon-neutral shipping by a specific date, but the actual emissions had barely dropped. It was exactly the kind of discrepancy Natalie needed to prove her point. She was putting together a detailed breakdown when her office door opened without a knock. Victoria walked in. "Ms. Hayes," she said, closing the door behind her. "Do you have a minute?" Natalie's guard went up immediately. "Of course." Victoria sat down across from her, crossing her legs, perfectly at ease. "I wanted to apologize," she said. Natalie blinked. "For what?" "For being unwelcoming when you first started. It wasn't professional." Victoria's smile was warm now, almost genuine. "The truth is, I was worried. Adrian's put a lot of faith in you, and I wasn't sure you were ready for it. But I've been watching your work, and I have to admit, I'm impressed." Natalie didn't trust this. Not even a little. "Thank you," she said carefully. "I know we got off on the wrong foot," Victoria continued, "but I think we want the same thing. A better company, a stronger brand. We just have different approaches." "Maybe. I'd like to help you with your presentation, if you'll let me." Every instinct Natalie had screamed no. "I appreciate the offer," she said slowly, "but I've got it covered." "I'm sure you do. But this is your first time presenting to the full board. It can be intimidating. I've done it dozens of times. I know what they respond to, what arguments land, what data they care about." She leaned forward slightly. "Let me help you make this bulletproof." Natalie wanted to say no. She wanted to tell Victoria to get out of her office and stay away from her work. But a small, treacherous part of her brain whispered that maybe Victoria was right. Maybe she did need help. Maybe this was an olive branch, not a trap. "I'll think about it," Natalie said. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt. "Don't think too long. We're running out of time." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Natalie sat there, staring at the closed door, her stomach churning. She pulled out her phone and texted Adrian. "Victoria just offered to help with my presentation. Thoughts?" His response came 5 minutes later. "What does your gut say?" "That it's a trap." "Then it probably is. Trust your gut." Natalie put the phone down and got back to work. Alone. 3 weeks before the presentation, things started going wrong. Small things, at first. A file that wouldn't open. A backup that got corrupted. Data that didn't match what she'd recorded the week before. Then bigger things. 2 weeks out, she came into her office to find her laptop dead. Completely fried. It said it was a power surge, but Natalie's office was the only one affected. She lost a week of work. Notes, drafts, analysis, all gone. She had backups, thankfully. Cloud storage saved her. But rebuilding everything took time she didn't have. 1 week out, someone leaked a draft of her presentation to the senior leadership team, not the final version. An early draft, full of half-formed ideas and incomplete data and arguments she'd already revised. By the time Natalie found out, it had already circulated. People were already talking, already poking holes in ideas she'd abandoned weeks ago. She knew who'd done it. She just couldn't prove it. She went to Adrian's office without an appointment, walking past his assistant, who tried to stop her. Adrian was on a call, but he took one look at her face and told whoever was on the other end he'd call them back. "What happened?" Natalie told him. "All of it. The corrupted files, the dead laptop, the leaked draft." Adrian listened, his expression unreadable. "You think it's Victoria?" he said when she finished. "I know it's Victoria. Can you prove it?" "No." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then we can't do anything." "She's sabotaging me." I believe you, but without proof, it's your word against hers, and she's been here a lot longer. Natalie felt something crack inside her chest. So that's it? She just gets away with it? No. Adrian stood up, walking around his desk. You finish your presentation. You make it so good that none of this matters. You show the board exactly what this company needs, and you do it so well that even Victoria can't tear it down. And if I can't, you will. How do you know? He looked at her steadily. Because you haven't quit yet. It was the same thing he'd said before. And somehow, it still worked. Natalie took a breath. Okay. She turned to leave, then stopped. Why are you doing this? Really? Why me? Adrian didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. Because my daughter is going to grow up watching what I do, how I lead, what I tolerate. And I don't want her to grow up thinking that power means you can ignore the truth. He paused. You remind me that truth still matters, even when it's inconvenient. Natalie felt her throat tighten. Don't let me down, she managed. I could say the same to you. She left his office and went back to work. The night before the presentation, Natalie didn't sleep. She ran through her slides 100 times, practiced her delivery, anticipated every possible question. She knew this material inside and out. She knew it was good, but she also knew that Victoria was waiting for her to fail, and she knew that one mistake could cost her everything. At 5 a.m., she gave up on sleep and went to the office. The building was empty, quiet. She made coffee in the executive kitchen and sat in the boardroom where the presentation would happen, staring at the empty chairs. She thought about calling her mom. They hadn't spoken in months. Not since her mom had told her she was wasting her potential working for a corporation that didn't care about her. Turned out, her mom had been right. But maybe Natalie could change that. At 7 a.m., people started arriving. Executives, board members, assistants. The room filled slowly, the energy shifting from quiet to tense. Victoria arrived at 7:45, impeccably dressed, perfectly composed. She smiled at Natalie. Big day, she said. Yeah. Nervous? Should I be? Victoria's smile didn't waver. We'll see. Adrian was the last to arrive, slipping into his seat at the head of the table just as the meeting started. He caught Natalie's eye and nodded once. She took a breath and began. The first slide went up without a hitch. Natalie's voice was steadier than she expected. She'd practiced this opening so many times that the words came automatically, muscle memory taking over while her brain tried to keep up with the adrenaline flooding her system. Good morning. Over the past 6 weeks, I've conducted a comprehensive audit of Sterling Global's marketing claims versus our actual performance. What I found is a gap, a significant one. And today, I'm going to show you exactly where we're falling short, why it matters, and how we fix it. She clicked to the next slide, a graph showing the company's sustainability promises alongside actual emissions data. The gap was stark, impossible to ignore. Last year, we publicly committed to carbon-neutral shipping by June. It's now October. Our emissions have dropped by 12%. We needed a 70% reduction to meet our own deadline. A murmur went through the room. Natalie kept going. This isn't about blame. It's about honesty. We made a promise we couldn't keep, and instead of acknowledging that, we stayed silent. Our customers noticed. Our competitors noticed. And it's costing us trust. She pulled up the next slide. Customer satisfaction scores, declining quarter over quarter. Social media sentiment analysis trending negative. Market share data showing a slow but steady erosion. People are starting to see through the marketing. They want substance, and right now, we're not giving it to them. Richard, the executive who dismissed her in that first meeting, cleared his throat. These are natural fluctuations. Every company experiences, not like this. Natalie cut him off, surprising herself. These aren't fluctuations. This is a pattern. And if we don't address it now, it's going to get worse. She could feel Victoria watching her from across the table, that cold, calculating stare that made Natalie's skin prickle. But she kept going. She walked them through campaign after campaign. The diversity initiative that was 90% stock photos and 10% actual policy change. The employee wellness program that existed only in press releases. The innovation lab that hadn't produced anything innovative in 2 years but burned through millions in funding. Every claim, every promise, Every carefully crafted piece of marketing that looked good on paper but fell apart under scrutiny. The room got quieter as she went on. Some of the executives were taking notes. Others were staring at the table. A few looked angry, but Natalie couldn't tell if they were angry at her or at what she was showing them. Adrian sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Natalie reached the final section of her presentation, the part she'd rewritten a dozen times, the part that would either prove she knew what she was doing or confirm everyone's suspicion that she was in over her head. "Here's what I'm proposing," she said, pulling up a new slide. "A complete overhaul of how we communicate with our customers. No more promises we can't keep. No more vague commitments. If we're going to claim something, we back it up with data, real data, publicly available, audited by third parties." She clicked to the next slide. "We establish a transparency dashboard, updated monthly, shows our progress on every major initiative we've committed to. Carbon emissions, diversity hiring, employee retention, supply chain ethics, everything." Another click. "We stop launching campaigns that are just optics. Every initiative needs measurable goals, realistic timelines, and accountability built in from day one. If we can't deliver, we don't make the promise." She could see Victoria's expression shifting, that practice neutrality cracking just slightly. "And finally," Natalie said, pulling up the last slide, "we acknowledge where we've fallen short, publicly. A campaign built around honesty. This is where we are. This is where we're going. This is how we're going to get there. No spin, no excuses." The room was silent. Natalie stood there, her heart pounding, waiting for someone to say something, anything. It was one of the board members who spoke first. An older man Natalie didn't recognize, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. "This would be a significant shift in strategy," he said slowly. "How do we know it won't backfire? Admitting failure publicly is risky." "So is lying," Natalie said. "And we're already doing that." "That's a strong word." "It's an accurate one," Adrian finally spoke. "What's the implementation timeline?" Natalie turned to him. "If we start now, we could have the transparency dashboard live in 3 months. The honesty campaign could launch in parallel. 6 months total for full rollout. Budget? Less than we're spending now on campaigns that aren't working. Pushback? Significant, but manageable." Adrian nodded slowly. Then he looked around the table. "Thoughts?" That's when Victoria made her move. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, her expression sympathetic, almost sad. "I think Natalie's passion is admirable," she said, her voice warm and reasonable. "And there are some interesting ideas here, but I have some concerns about the approach." Natalie's stomach dropped. "First," Victoria continued, "I'm worried about the message this sends. Publicly admitting failure makes us look weak. Our competitors will use it against us. Or our customers will respect our honesty," Natalie said. Victoria smiled. "Perhaps. But there's another issue." She pulled out her phone, tapping something on the screen. "I think we need to talk about how this initiative started." Natalie's pulse spiked. Victoria connected her phone to the screen, replacing Natalie's presentation with an audio file. "I received this recording last week," Victoria said, "from a concerned employee who was worried about the direction of this transparency initiative. I think the board should hear it." She hit play. Natalie's voice filled the room. "I think this company is built on marketing bullshit." Natalie's blood went cold. The recording kept playing, her voice, from the gala, saying things that sounded even worse out of context, talking about fake promises and hollow marketing and how the company was more interested in looking good than being good. But it was wrong, edited. The pauses were in the wrong places. Sentences were cut and rearranged. It sounded like she was bragging, like she was proud of manipulating her way into this position. "We're not selling products. We're selling a feeling, and it's fake." The recording cut off. The room was silent. Natalie couldn't breathe. "I'm not trying to attack Natalie," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false concern. "But I think we need to question the motivations here. This recording was made at the gala, the same night Natalie met Adrian, and now, 6 weeks later, she's in a leadership position, pushing an agenda that conveniently aligns with criticisms she was already making." Richard leaned forward. "Are you saying she manipulated her way into this position?" "I'm saying we should ask the question." All eyes turned to Natalie. She stood there, frozen, her mind racing. This was it. the trap she'd been waiting for, and she'd walked right into it. That's not what happened, she said, her voice coming out smaller than she wanted. Then what did happen? Victoria asked, all innocence. That recording is edited. That's not how the conversation went. So you didn't say those things? I said them, but not like that. Not in that order. You cut it up to make it sound. So you did say the company is built on bullshit. Natalie felt the walls closing in. Yes, but... And you did say we're selling fake feelings. It was a private conversation that you had with the CEO. Victoria's voice got harder. Who then gave you a job 6 weeks later? You can see how that looks. The board members were whispering to each other now. Natalie could see the doubt spreading across their faces. She looked at Adrian. He was staring at this table, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. He wasn't defending her. I didn't manipulate anyone, Natalie said, her voice breaking. I didn't know who he was. I was just being honest. Conveniently honest, Victoria said. That's not... I think we should table this discussion until we can verify the authenticity of Ms. Hayes' intentions. Victoria looked at Adrian. Don't you agree? Adrian finally looked up. Natalie waited for him to say something, to tell them the recording was fake, that Victoria was lying, that he knew exactly what had happened that night. But he didn't. I think, Adrian said slowly, we need a 10-minute recess. Natalie's world tilted. He stood up and walked out of the room without looking at her. The board members followed, then the executives. One by one, they filed out, leaving Natalie standing alone at the front of the room with her presentation still on the screen behind her. Victoria was the last to leave. She paused at the door, looking back at Natalie with something that might have been pity. I did warn you, she said softly. I told you to figure out how things work around here before you tried to change them. Then she was gone. Natalie stood there, alone, her hands shaking. She'd lost. Just like that. 6 weeks of work, 6 weeks of fighting, 6 weeks of believing she could actually make a difference, and it was over. She should have known better. People like her didn't win against people like Victoria. She grabbed her laptop with numb fingers and walked out of the boardroom. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Anywhere away. She made it to the bathroom before the tears started. She locked herself in a stall and sat down on the closed toilet lid, pressing her hands to her face, trying to breathe through the tightness in her chest. This was worse than being fired. This was being humiliated in front of everyone who mattered. This was having her integrity questioned, her motivations twisted, her honesty used as a weapon against her. And Adrian had just sat there. He'd said he valued truth. He'd said he wanted someone who would be honest even when it was uncomfortable. But when it actually mattered, he'd stayed silent. The bathroom door opened. Natalie held her breath, trying to stay quiet. Natalie? It was Adrian's assistant, June, her name was. A woman in her 50s who'd been nothing but kind to Natalie since day one. I know you're in here, June said gently. Adrian wants to see you. Tell him I quit. You don't mean that. I do. There was a pause. Then June's voice got firmer. Get out of that stall and pull yourself together. You're not done yet. Did you hear what just happened in there? Everyone heard. The whole floor's talking about it. And you know what they're saying? Natalie didn't answer. They're saying Victoria finally showed her hand, and some of us have been waiting for that for a very long time. Natalie opened the stall door. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged. She looked like exactly what she was, someone who'd just had their career destroyed in front of an audience. June handed her a tissue. Adrian's in his office. He's not asking. He's telling. He didn't defend me. No, he didn't. So why would I? Because you need to hear what he has to say. And because walking out now means Victoria wins. June's expression softened. Don't let her win. Natalie wiped her eyes, blew her nose, looked at herself in the mirror and hated what she saw. But she went anyway. Adrian's office door was open. He was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city. Close the door, he said without turning around. Natalie closed it. I didn't manipulate you, she said before he could speak. That recording is edited. She cut it up to make it sound like, I know. Natalie stopped. You know? Of course I know. Adrian finally turned around. His expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. I was there. I remember exactly what you said and how you said it. That recording is a hack job. Then why didn't you say that in there? Because I needed to see how far she'd go. Natalie stared at him. You used me as bait. No, I used the situation as evidence. What's the difference? Oops. The difference is I'm about to fix this. Adrian walked to his desk, picking up his phone. But I need you to trust me for about 20 more minutes. Can you do that? I don't know. Natalie. She looked at him, really looked at him. At the tension in his shoulders, the set of his jaw, the anger he was barely keeping contained. He wasn't calm. He was furious. 20 minutes, she said. Good. Go back to the boardroom. Don't say anything. Just wait. For what? You'll see. He was already dialing someone on his phone, dismissing her. Natalie left his office feeling more confused than before. She went back to the boardroom. It was still empty. She sat down in her chair and waited. 15 minutes later, the board members started filtering back in, then the executives, then Victoria, looking pleased with herself. Adrian was the last to arrive. He was carrying a laptop. Thank you for your patience, he said, his voice professional. Cold. Before we continue, there's something I need to address. He set the laptop on the table and opened it. The recording Ms. Kane played was edited, he said flatly, deliberately and maliciously. I know this because I've spent the last 15 minutes reviewing security footage from the gala. He turned the laptop so the screen faced the room. Our venue has cameras, audio and video. I had our security team pull every angle from the night in question. He hit play. The screen showed the gala, the ballroom from a high angle, tables full of people. And there, in the corner, Natalie and Adrian sitting together. The audio was crystal clear. Adrian's voice came through first. What would you say if you weren't worried about your paycheck? Then Natalie's. Honestly? Honestly. The conversation played out exactly as Natalie remembered. Her criticisms, yes, but also Adrian's questions. The context. The flow. The parts where she'd hesitated, where she'd tried to backtrack, where Adrian had encouraged her to keep going. It was nothing like Victoria's recording. When it finished, Adrian closed the laptop. Ms. Kane's recording was edited to remove my questions and rearrange Ms. Hayes' responses. The result is a fabrication designed to undermine her credibility and sabotage this initiative. He looked directly at Victoria. I've also asked IT to review access logs for Ms. Hayes' files over the past 6 weeks. They found multiple unauthorized accesses from Ms. Kane's credentials, including the leak of the early presentation draft. Victoria's face went pale. Additionally, Adrian continued, his voice getting harder, I've reviewed the timeline of technical issues Ms. Hayes experienced. The corrupted files, the dead laptop, the missing emails. Its preliminary investigation suggests deliberate interference. The room was dead silent. Ms. Kane, Adrian said, you're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You'll receive severance as outlined in your contract, but you're done here. Victoria stood up, her composure finally cracking. You can't. I can. And I am. This is because of her? Victoria gestured at Natalie. You're going to throw away 15 years because some junior employee, because you sabotaged a company initiative out of personal ego. Adrian cut her off. Because you manufactured evidence to destroy someone's reputation. Because you've created a culture where people are afraid to tell the truth. He stepped closer to her. You're exactly the problem Natalie's been trying to fix, and I should have seen it sooner. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Victoria looked around the room, searching for support, but no one met her eyes. She grabbed her purse and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The security guards followed. The door closed. Adrian turned back to the board. Ms. Hayes' presentation stands as delivered. I'm authorizing the Transparency Initiative effective immediately. Full budget, full support, full authority. Anyone who has a problem with that can follow Ms. Kane out the door. No one moved. Meeting adjourned. The board members filed out, some of them nodding to Natalie as they passed. The executives followed, looking shell-shocked. Finally, it was just Natalie and Adrian. She sat there, her hands still shaking, trying to process what had just happened. You had that footage the whole time, she said. I pulled it during the recess. You could have shown it earlier, before she played that recording. I could have. Adrian sat down across from her. But then I wouldn't have known for sure that she was willing to go that far. Now I do. You gambled with my career. I gambled with her ego, and I won. Natalie didn't know whether to be grateful or angry. Maybe both. What happens now? She asked. Now you do your job. You implement everything you just presented. You build the transparency dashboard. You launch the honesty campaign. You fix this company. Just like that? Just like that. She looked at him. People are still going to hate me more than before. Probably. Some of them are going to try to undermine me. Definitely. So why are you doing this? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair. Because my daughter asked me something last night, he said softly. She asked if my company helps people or hurts people, and I realized I didn't know how to answer her. He met Natalie's eyes. I want to be able to answer her honestly, and that starts with you. Natalie felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Don't make me regret this, Adrian said. I'll try not to. Good. He stood up. Take the rest of the day off. You've earned it. He left. Natalie sat alone in the boardroom, surrounded by empty chairs, her presentation still pulled up on the screen. She'd survived. More than that, she'd won. It didn't feel real yet. She packed up her laptop and headed for the elevator. As she passed through the executive floor, she noticed people watching her, some with curiosity, some with respect, a few with barely concealed resentment. June caught her eye and gave her a small nod. Natalie made it to the parking garage before she let herself react. She sat in her car, hands on the steering wheel, and started laughing. It was the kind of laugh that came from relief and disbelief and sheer exhaustion all mixed together. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She pulled out her phone and saw a text from Adrian. You did good in there. Proud of you. Natalie stared at the message for a long time. Then she started her car and drove home. She had work to do. And for the first time since this whole thing started, she actually believed she could do it. The day after Victoria's firing, Natalie came into the office expecting chaos. What she got was silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that came from people not knowing what to say, how to act, whether to acknowledge what had happened or pretend it hadn't. The kind that followed explosions. She walked through the executive floor and people looked away. Some nodded. Most didn't. A few watched her with expressions she couldn't read, somewhere between respect and wariness, like she was a bomb that might go off again if they got too close. Natalie kept her head down and went to her office. There was a box on her desk. For one horrible moment, she thought it was her things. That Adrian had changed his mind overnight, that the board had overruled him, that this whole thing had been temporary and now it was over. Then she saw the note on top. Thought you might need this. Inside the box was a new laptop, top of the line, and underneath it, a company credit card with her name on it and a note that said no limits on the transparency initiative, make it count. Natalie sat down hard in her chair. This was real. This was actually happening. She pulled out the laptop and started setting it up, her hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. She had 3 months to build the transparency dashboard, 6 months to launch the full campaign. She'd promised the board results and now she had to deliver them. No pressure. Her phone buzzed. A calendar invite from Adrian for 9 a.m. Subject line, check-in. She accepted it and got to work. At 9 exactly, she headed to Adrian's office. His assistant waved her through without making her wait, which felt significant somehow. Like she'd graduated from someone who needed permission to someone who belonged. Adrian was at his desk, typing something on his laptop. He looked tired, more tired than usual. Close the door, he said. Natalie closed it and sat down. Adrian finished whatever he was typing and looked up. How bad is it out there? Define bad. People treating you like a pariah. Some of them, Natalie shrugged. Some are just confused. A few seem genuinely supportive. Give it time. The supportive ones will find their courage once they see you're not going anywhere. And the others? Will either come around or leave. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Victoria had a lot of allies. Losing her is going to create a power vacuum. People are going to scramble to figure out where they stand. That sounds exhausting. It is. Which is why I need you focused on your work, not on office politics. Easy for you to say. No, it's not. Adrian's expression was serious. But it's necessary. The transparency initiative is the most important thing happening in this company right now. If you get distracted by people's opinions of you, it fails. And if it fails, Victoria wins even from outside these walls. Natalie knew he was right. It didn't make it easier. I got your gift, she said, changing the subject. The laptop. You needed one that worked. And the credit card? You need a budget that works too. He pulled up something on his screen. I'm assigning you a team, 3 people to start. You pick them. Anyone in the company, any department. If they don't want to transfer, I'll make them want to. Natalie blinked. You're serious? You can't build this alone. You need people you trust. He looked at her. Do you have people you trust? She thought about it. She'd spent so long keeping her head down, staying invisible, that she hadn't exactly built relationships. But there were a few people. Marketing coordinators who'd always been straight with her. An analyst in finance who'd helped her dig up data without asking too many questions. A junior designer who'd stayed late to help her fix a presentation deck once without being asked. Maybe, she said, then recruit them. You've got 48 hours. What if they say no? They won't. You're the person who just took down Victoria Kane. That's currency. Natalie wasn't sure she liked that logic, but she couldn't argue with it. Anything else? She asked. Yeah. Adrian's expression shifted slightly. My daughter wants to meet you. That caught Natalie completely off guard. What? Emma. She asked about you at dinner last night, wanted to know who the woman was who stood up to the mean lady. You told your 7-year-old about work? She asked why I was on my phone so much. I gave her the kid-friendly version. He smiled faintly. She thinks you're a superhero. Natalie felt her face go warm. I'm definitely not a superhero. Try telling her that. She's already drawn you a picture. She what? Drew you a picture. It's on my fridge upstairs. You're wearing a cape. Natalie didn't know what to say to that. I'm not saying you have to meet her, Adrian continued. But if you're up for it, I'm having dinner with her tomorrow night, just the 2 of us. You could join if you want. No pressure. That's definitely pressure. Fair enough. He went back to his laptop. Think about it. Let me know. Natalie left his office feeling more off balance than when she'd arrived. A 7-year-old had drawn her a picture. With a cape. She went back to her office and tried very hard not to think about how much that meant to her. The next 48 hours were a blur. Natalie reached out to the 3 people she'd identified. The first was Marcus Chen, a data analyst in finance who'd helped her cross-reference shipping emissions without asking why she needed them. He said yes before she finished explaining the offer. The second was Priya Sharma, a marketing coordinator who'd been at the company for 3 years and had the sharpest eye for bullshit Natalie had ever seen. She said yes, but asked for a 20% raise. Natalie got her 30. The third was James Rivera, a junior designer who was young and hungry and had ideas that made Natalie's head spin in the best way. He said yes and then asked if he could bring coffee to their first meeting because he was freaking out in a good way. By the end of the second day, Natalie had a team. She also had a dinner invitation she still hadn't responded to. She stared at her phone for 10 minutes before finally typing out a message to Adrian. What time tomorrow? His response came immediately. 6, casual. Emma's already excited. No pressure though, none at all. Natalie put her phone down and tried to remember the last time she'd had dinner with anyone who wasn't a delivery driver. She couldn't. The next evening, Natalie stood outside Adrian's building feeling like an idiot. She'd changed outfits 3 times. Too formal, then too casual, then back to something in the middle that she hoped said, I'm approachable but also take me seriously without trying too hard. She'd brought flowers because showing up empty-handed felt wrong, then almost left them in the car because bringing flowers felt like too much. She kept the flowers. The doorman recognized her from her employee badge and sent her up without question. The elevator was all glass and polished steel, rising smoothly to the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into Adrian's apartment. It was nothing like Natalie expected. She'd imagined something cold and minimalist and expensive. What she got was warm and lived in and covered in evidence of a 7-year-old. Drawings on the fridge, toys in a basket by the couch, a blanket fort in the corner that looked structurally questionable. Adrian appeared from the kitchen, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that made him look nothing like the CEO who'd fired Victoria 2 days ago. You came, he said. You invited me. I know, but I thought you might panic and cancel. I considered it. He smiled. Come in. Emma's finishing her homework. She'll be out in a minute. Natalie stepped inside, still holding the flowers awkwardly. These are for, I don't know, your table? They're great, thank you. Adrian took them and headed for the kitchen. You want something to drink? Wine, water, juice that's supposed to be healthy but tastes like sadness? What are you having? The sad juice. Emma made me promise. Then I'll have wine. He laughed and poured her a glass. She followed him into the kitchen, which was bigger than her entire apartment and somehow still managed to feel cozy. There was something on the stove that smelled amazing. You cook? Natalie asked. I try. Emma's standards are low, which helps. Daddy! A small voice came from down the hallway, followed by the sound of running feet. Emma Cole appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing pajamas covered in stars and holding a piece of paper. She was smaller than Natalie expected, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail in her father's eyes. She looked at Natalie with the kind of open curiosity only kids could pull off. Are you Natalie? She asked. I am. You're the superhero lady. Natalie glanced at Adrian, who was trying not to smile. I don't know about superhero, Natalie said carefully. Daddy said you stood up to someone mean and won. That's what superheroes do. I guess when you put it that way. Emma held up the paper she was carrying. I drew you. It was a crayon drawing of a stick figure with long hair and a red cape standing next to what looked like a building. In the corner was a smaller stick figure with a smile. That's you, Emma explained, pointing to the big figure. And that's me. We're friends. Natalie felt something crack in her chest. We are. Yeah, Daddy said you're helping make his company better. That means you're nice. Emma's logic is flawless, Adrian said from the stove. Natalie knelt down so she was at Emma's eye level. Can I keep this? Emma's face lit up. Really? Really? It's the nicest thing anyone's given me in a long time. I can make you another one if you want, with more capes. One cape is perfect. Emma beamed and ran off to set the table, leaving Natalie kneeling in the kitchen with a crayon drawing and a lump in her throat. Adrian crouched down next to her. You okay? Yeah, just wasn't expecting that. She has that effect on people. He stood up, offering Natalie a hand. She took it and let him pull her up. Dinner was surprisingly easy. Emma dominated the conversation, talking about school and her friends and a science project about volcanoes that had apparently gone wrong in the best way. She asked Natalie questions that were startlingly direct, like whether she had a boyfriend and why not, and did she want to borrow Emma's hamster for company. Natalie found herself laughing more than she had in months. Adrian mostly watched, occasionally redirecting Emma when she got too nosy, but clearly enjoying seeing his daughter charm someone new. After dinner, Emma asked if Natalie wanted to see her room. Adrian gave Natalie an apologetic look, but Natalie said yes before he could offer her an out. Emma's room was exactly what a 7-year-old's room should be. Books stacked haphazardly, stuffed animals arranged by some logic only she understood, and drawings covering every available surface. This is my favorite, Emma said, pointing to a drawing of a man and a little girl holding hands. That's me and Daddy. It's beautiful. Do you have a daddy? The question was innocent, but it still made Natalie's chest tighten. I do, but I don't see him much anymore. How come? We had a disagreement a long time ago. About what? About who I was supposed to be. Emma frowned, thinking about that. That's sad. Yeah, it is. You should call him. Daddy says talking fixes most things. Natalie smiled despite herself. Your daddy's pretty smart. I know. Emma climbed onto her bed, suddenly looking tired. Will you come back and visit? Do you want me to? Yeah, you're nice, and Daddy smiles more when you're here. Natalie's heart did something complicated. Then I'll come back. Promise? Promise. Emma yawned and flopped back onto her pillows. Adrian appeared in the doorway. Bedtime, kiddo. But we're talking. You can talk to Natalie another time. Say goodnight. Good night, Natalie. Good night, Emma. Natalie followed Adrian back to the living room, leaving him to handle bedtime. She stood by the windows looking out at the city lights, trying to process everything she was feeling. Adrian came back 10 minutes later. She's out, he said, Told me to tell you thank you for coming. I should be thanking you. I haven't had a dinner like that in years. She liked you. That doesn't happen with everyone. She's easy to like. Adrian poured himself a glass of wine and joined her by the window. They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment. Can I ask you something? Natalie said. Sure. Why are you doing this? Not just the transparency initiative. This. Inviting me to dinner. Letting me meet Emma. You didn't have to do any of that. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than usual. Because I spend all day surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, access, approval, whatever. And you don't. You just want to do the right thing. That's rare. And I wanted Emma to meet someone like that. He looked at her. Plus, she was going to keep asking until I said yes. Kid's relentless. Natalie smiled. Wonder where she gets that. No idea. They talked for another hour, about nothing important. Movies they'd seen, places they'd traveled, things they missed about being young and not having responsibilities. It was easy in a way Natalie hadn't expected, like talking to someone she'd known for years instead of weeks. When she finally left, Emma's drawing carefully tucked into her bag, Adrian walked her to the elevator. Thank you for tonight, he said. I didn't do anything. You made my daughter happy. That's not nothing. The elevator arrived. Natalie stepped inside, then turned. She was right, you know. About what? You do smile more. The doors closed before he could respond, but Natalie saw his expression shift, saw something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. She rode down to the lobby feeling lighter than she had in years. The next 3 months were the hardest Natalie had ever worked. Building the transparency dashboard from scratch meant coordinating with every department, auditing every claim the company had made publicly, and establishing metrics that actually meant something. Marcus handled the data infrastructure. Priya managed stakeholder communication. James designed the interface. And Natalie held it all together, working 18-hour days and surviving on coffee and sheer determination. There were setbacks. A data breach that set them back 2 weeks. A department head who refused to cooperate until Adrian personally intervened. A board member who tried to water down the reporting standards until Natalie threatened to resign and make the reason public. But slowly, impossibly, it came together. Adrian checked in weekly, sometimes in person, sometimes over text, always with the same question, what do you need? And when she told him, he made it happen. They fell into a rhythm. Work meetings that ran long and turned into dinner. Strategy sessions that somehow became conversations about everything else. Emma started asking when Natalie was coming over again, and Natalie started saying yes more often than she probably should. She tried not to think too hard about what that meant. 3 weeks before launch, Natalie's mom called. She hadn't spoken to her mother in almost a year. Not since the fight about Natalie wasting her potential, about settling for a corporate job that would grind her down until there was nothing left. Natalie almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hi, Mom. Natalie. Her mother's voice was careful, cautious. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I wasn't sure I would either. There was a long pause. I saw the article, her mom said finally. What article? The one in the business section, about the transparency initiative, about you. Natalie's stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on the work that she hadn't noticed the press coverage starting to build. A few industry blogs at first, then larger outlets picking it up. Apparently someone had written a profile. I didn't know that was published, Natalie said. It says you're leading a company-wide overhaul, that you convinced the CEO to completely change their approach to customer communication. Her mom paused. It says you're doing something that matters. Natalie felt her throat tighten. I'm trying. I'm proud of you. The words hit harder than Natalie expected. You told me I was wasting my life at this company. I know. I was wrong. Her mom's voice cracked slightly. I was scared you were going to disappear into something that didn't value you, but it sounds like you made them value you instead. Natalie sat down hard in her office chair. It wasn't easy, she said quietly. The important things never are. They talked for an hour, really talked, for the first time in years, about the work Natalie was doing, about her mom's life, about the things they'd said to each other that they both regretted. When they finally hung up, Natalie felt like something heavy had lifted. She texted Adrian, My mom called. She's proud of me. His response came immediately. She should be. I think I might cry. Do it. You've earned it. Natalie laughed and got back to work. Launch day came faster than expected. The transparency dashboard went live at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. Natalie stood in her office watching the metrics update in real time, her heart in her throat. Traffic was immediate. Massive. The press had picked up the story, and customers were flooding the site, checking claims, reading reports, leaving comments. Marcus called her. We're getting slammed. Servers holding, but barely. Can we handle it? Yeah, but this is way more traffic than we projected. Is that good or bad? It's insane. In a good way. By noon, the dashboard had been viewed over 1 million times. By 5 p.m., it was trending on social media. People were praising the transparency, sharing screenshots, comparing Sterling Global to competitors who weren't being nearly as honest. But there were criticisms too. People pointing out areas where the company was falling short, demanding explanations, calling out inconsistencies. And that was the point. Natalie had built the dashboard to be honest, even when honesty was uncomfortable. At 6 p.m., Adrian called an emergency meeting. Natalie's stomach dropped, but when she got to his office, he was smiling. We're getting killed on the Q3 emissions data, he said. I know. And the diversity hiring numbers. I know. And people are demanding we explain why our supply chain standards aren't where we said they'd be. I know. Good. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Because that means they're paying attention. That means they believe we're actually telling them the truth. Natalie felt something loosen in her chest. So we're not shutting it down? Are you kidding? This is exactly what we wanted. Accountability. Real accountability. He pulled up something on his screen. Customer sentiment is up 18% since this morning. Brand trust is at a 5-year high. We're getting crucified on our failures and praised for admitting them. That's good? That's perfect. He stood up and extended his hand. Natalie shook it, confused. Congratulations, Adrian said. You just changed this company. Natalie looked at him, at the genuine pride in his expression, and felt tears prick her eyes. We're not done, she managed. No, but we started. That's more than most people can say. That night, Natalie went home to her tiny apartment and allowed herself to feel it. The relief, the pride, the bone-deep exhaustion. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma, sent from Adrian's phone. Daddy says you're a real superhero now. Can I make you a crown? Natalie smiled and typed back. A crown would be perfect. She fell asleep on her couch, still in her work clothes, Emma's drawing on her coffee table. And for the first time in her entire life, Natalie Hayes felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The success of the transparency dashboard didn't make everything easier. If anything, it made things harder. Within 2 weeks of launch, Natalie's team had tripled in size. New hires, transfers from other departments, people who suddenly wanted to be part of what they were calling the honesty revolution. It sounded dramatic when people said it out loud, but Natalie couldn't deny that something had shifted. The company felt different, more awake somehow. But with that awakening came scrutiny. Reporters started calling. Industry analysts wanted interviews. Competitors began launching their own transparency initiatives, some genuine, most just copying the aesthetic without the substance. And inside Sterling Global, the departments that had been dragging their feet were now under pressure to actually deliver on the promises they'd been making for years. Which meant Natalie spent most of her days in meetings with people who resented her for making their jobs harder. This is unrealistic, a supply chain director told her in a meeting that was supposed to last 30 minutes and had stretched to 2 hours. You're asking us to overhaul our entire vendor network in 6 months. That's not how this works. Then how long does it take? Natalie asked. 18 months, minimum. Then we tell people 18 months. We update the dashboard with a realistic timeline and show progress every quarter. And look incompetent in the meantime? We already look incompetent. At least this way we're honest about it. The director stared at her like she'd suggested setting the building on fire. These conversations happened daily. People who'd spent years building systems that looked good on paper but fell apart under examination were suddenly being asked to rebuild everything with the lights on. It was uncomfortable. It was expensive. And it made Natalie the easiest person to blame. She tried not to take it personally. She mostly failed. They hate me, she told Adrian one evening. They were in his office, going over quarterly projections, but the conversation had drifted. It did that more often lately. They don't hate you, Adrian said, not looking up from his laptop. They hate change. You just happen to be the face of it. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be, it's just true. Natalie leaned back in her chair, exhausted. She'd been running on fumes for weeks, and it was starting to show. Her apartment was a disaster. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cooked a real meal. Her friends from before Sterling Global had stopped calling because she never answered. You need a break, Adrian said, finally looking up. I'm fine. You're falling asleep in your chair. I'm resting my eyes. Natalie. She opened her eyes. Adrian was watching her with that expression he got sometimes, the one that made it hard to remember he was her boss, and not just someone who knew her too well. When's the last time you took a day off? He asked. I don't know. June? It's November. Then June. Adrian closed his laptop. Take this weekend. Actual time off. No emails, no calls, no dashboard monitoring. I can't just... You can. I'm telling you to. CEO's orders. That's an abuse of power. Probably. He smiled slightly. Do it anyway. Natalie wanted to argue, but the truth was she was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. The kind of tired that came from running on adrenaline for so long that she'd forgotten what normal felt like. Fine, she said. But if anything breaks, it won't. And if it does, Marcus and Priya can handle it. He paused. Actually, Emma wants to know if you're coming to her birthday party on Saturday. That caught Natalie off guard. Her birthday's this weekend? She's been talking about it for a month. I thought I mentioned it. You didn't. Then I'm mentioning it now. Saturday, 2 p.m. Nothing fancy, just cake and chaos. He looked at her carefully. You don't have to come, but she's been asking. Natalie thought about saying no. Thought about using the weekend to catch up on sleep and laundry and all the normal person things she'd been neglecting. But the idea of disappointing Emma made her chest hurt. Okay, she said. I'll be there. Adrian's expression softened in a way that made Natalie's pulse do something complicated. Good, he said quietly. She'll be happy. Saturday arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Natalie stood outside Adrian's building for the second time in 3 months, holding a wrapped present and feeling out of place. She'd agonized over what to get an 8-year-old, finally settling on an art set after remembering all the drawings covering Emma's room. The doorman recognized her this time and sent her up with a smile. The elevator doors opened to controlled chaos. Adrian's apartment was full of kids, maybe a dozen of them, running around with the kind of manic energy that only came from sugar and excitement. Balloons were everywhere. There was an elaborate cake on the dining table shaped like a castle. Music played from somewhere Natalie couldn't see. Emma spotted her immediately and ran over, wearing a princess dress and a paper crown. You came! Of course I came. Happy birthday. Emma threw her arms around Natalie's waist, squeezing hard. Natalie froze for a second, then hugged her back, careful not to crush the crown. Come meet my friends, Emma said, grabbing Natalie's hand and dragging her into the chaos before she could protest. The next 2 hours were a blur of kids' games, cake that was way too sweet, and a piñata incident that resulted in candy everywhere. Natalie found herself laughing more than she had in months, watching Emma boss around her friends with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it. She wondered if Emma got that from Adrian, or if it was just who she was. Adrian appeared at her elbow at some point, holding 2 glasses of wine. You're surviving, he said, handing her one. Barely. That makes 2 of us. They stood together, watching Emma explain the rules of some game she'd apparently invented on the spot. The other kids looked confused, but went along with it anyway. She's amazing, Natalie said. She is. Adrian's voice was soft. Sometimes I can't believe she's mine. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the only thing I've done right without second-guessing it. Natalie looked at him. Really looked at him. At the tired lines around his eyes, the gray starting to show at his temples, the way he watched his daughter like she was the most important thing in the world. Because she was. I think you've done more than one thing right, Natalie said quietly. Adrian glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. Yeah? Yeah. The moment stretched between them, fragile and significant. Then Emma shrieked because someone had knocked over the punch bowl, and Adrian sighed and went to handle it. Natalie stayed where she was, her heart doing something she didn't want to name. The party wound down as parents came to collect their kids. Emma opened presents with enthusiastic chaos, thanking everyone with the kind of genuine excitement that made Natalie's gift of art supplies feel inadequate until Emma hugged her and said it was the best thing ever. By 5 p.m., the apartment was quiet again. Just Natalie, Adrian, and Emma, who was crashed on the couch surrounded by wrapping paper and new toys. "You don't have to stay," Adrian said, collecting plates. "I know you probably have plans." "I don't," Natalie admitted. "My plan was to sleep for 12 hours. "Sounds ambitious." "I'm an ambitious person," he smiled. "Help me clean up?" Emma's going to be useless for the rest of the night. They worked in comfortable silence, throwing away paper plates and deflating balloons. Emma dozed on the couch, still wearing her crown, clutching a stuffed dragon someone had given her. When the apartment was mostly restored to order, Adrian opened another bottle of wine and they ended up on the balcony, looking out at the city as the sun set somewhere behind the clouds. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said after a while. "Sure." "Are you happy?" The question surprised her. "What?" "With the job. With everything that's happened. Are you happy?" Natalie thought about it. Really thought about it. 6 months ago, she'd been invisible. Broke. Convinced that staying small was the only way to stay safe. She'd hated her job and herself and the compromises she'd made just to survive. Now she was leading an initiative that was changing an entire company. She had a team that respected her. She had work that mattered. She had a 7-year-old who drew her pictures and a CEO who trusted her with things that actually counted. "Yeah," she said finally. "I think I am." Adrian nodded slowly. "Good. You deserve to be." "So do you." He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "I'm getting there." They stood there as the light faded, the city coming alive with lights below them. Natalie felt something settling in her chest, something that felt like belonging. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For taking a chance on me. For not firing me when you probably should have. For letting me meet Emma. For all of it." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "I should be thanking you. You reminded me what this was supposed to be about. Why I started this company in the first place." He paused. "I'd forgotten, and that's dangerous." "You didn't forget, you just got busy." "That's a generous interpretation. I'm a generous person." He smiled, and Natalie felt her heart skip. They were standing closer than she'd realized. Close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes in the fading light. Close enough that if she just leaned forward slightly. "Daddy, I'm hungry." Emma's voice came from inside. The moment shattered. Adrian stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Duty calls." "Yeah." He headed inside. Natalie stayed on the balcony for another minute, trying to get her breathing under control. This was a bad idea. Getting attached to Adrian, to Emma, to this life that still felt too good to be real. She was setting herself up for disappointment. She knew that. But she couldn't seem to stop. The following Monday, everything changed again. Natalie was in a meeting with the PR team when June appeared in the doorway, her expression urgent. "Natalie, Adrian needs you. Now." The tone made Natalie's stomach drop. She excused herself and followed June to Adrian's office, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Adrian was at his desk, his laptop open, his expression harder than she'd seen since the day he fired Victoria. "Close the door," he said. Natalie closed it. "What's wrong?" "Victoria's suing the company, and you specifically." The words took a second to process. "What?" "Wrongful termination, defamation, emotional distress. She's claiming you fabricated evidence to get her fired and that I enabled it." He turned the laptop so Natalie could see the legal filing. "She's asking for $50 million in damages." Natalie sat down hard. "She's lying." "I know she's lying, but she's got lawyers who don't care." Adrian's jaw was tight. "They filed this morning. It's already hit the press. Our stock dropped 3% in the first hour." "Can she win?" "No. We have the security footage, the IT logs, everything. But that doesn't matter. The lawsuit itself is the weapon. She's betting the negative publicity will force us to settle. Natalie felt sick. This is my fault. This is Victoria being exactly who she's always been. You just had the audacity to call her on it. If I hadn't pushed so hard, then nothing would have changed, and we'd still be lying to our customers. Adrian stood up, walking to the window. This is going to get ugly. The lawyers will want depositions, discovery. It'll drag on for months, maybe years. And Victoria's going to use every opportunity to paint you as someone who manipulated me. Maybe I should resign. Take myself out of the equation. No! The word came out sharp enough to make Natalie flinch. Adrian turned to face her. You resign, she wins. You walk away, she gets exactly what she wants. Every person in this company who believed in the transparency initiative will see it as proof that honesty doesn't pay, that the system still protects people like her. And if I stay, the company bleeds money on legal fees. Money I have, integrity I don't. He crossed the room, stopping in front of her. I'm not asking you to fight this alone. I'm fighting it with you. But I need to know you're in this. Actually in this. Not halfway out the door looking for an escape. Natalie looked up at him. At the determination in his eyes, the barely controlled anger, the absolute certainty that they were right, and Victoria was wrong. She thought about running, about going back to being invisible, to staying safe, to never sticking her neck out again. Then she thought about Emma's drawing on her fridge, about Marcus and Priya and James and everyone else who'd believed in something better, about the customers who were finally getting honest answers, about the person she'd become over the past 6 months. I'm in, she said. You're sure? No, but I'm in anyway. Adrian's expression softened. Okay, then we do this together. The next 3 months were brutal. Victoria's lawyers went after everything. Every email Natalie had ever sent, every conversation she'd had, every decision she'd made. They deposed her 3 times, asking the same questions in different ways, looking for contradictions. The press coverage was relentless. Some outlets defended Sterling Global's transparency initiative. Others painted Natalie as a manipulative social climber who'd seduced her way into power. The comment sections were vicious. Natalie stopped reading them. She started therapy. Not because Adrian suggested it, though he did, because she needed someone to talk to who wasn't involved in the lawsuit, who could help her process the anger and fear and exhaustion without judgment. It helped. Not as much as she wanted, but enough. Adrian was there through all of it, not hovering, not micromanaging, just present, checking in, making sure she ate, sending her home when she worked too late, fighting the lawsuit with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. Emma sent her drawings, little crayon sketches with messages like, "You're still a superhero, and don't let the mean lady win." Natalie kept every single one. The transparency initiative kept growing. Despite the lawsuit, maybe because of it, more companies started following Sterling Global's model. The dashboard became an industry standard. Customers rewarded honesty with loyalty. The numbers didn't lie. And slowly, painfully, the truth came out. Victoria's lawyers had tried to bury the evidence, but Adrian's legal team was better. The security footage from the gala got submitted. The IT log showing Victoria's unauthorized access to Natalie's files got entered into the record. Former employees started coming forward with their own stories of Victoria's intimidation tactics. The case started falling apart. In March, 5 months after Victoria filed, her lawyers reached out about settling. Adrian called Natalie into his office to discuss it. They're offering to drop everything if we agree not to countersue and sign an NDA, he said. Natalie's first instinct was to say yes, to take the exit and move on with her life. But something stopped her. What do you want to do? She asked. I want to take this to trial. I want a jury to see exactly what she did. I want it on the public record that she fabricated evidence and sabotaged a good faith initiative. He paused. But this is your call. You're the one she's targeting. You're the one who has to live with whatever we decide. Natalie thought about it, about the cost of going to trial, the time, the continued scrutiny, about the possibility that despite all the evidence, a jury might side with Victoria anyway. Then she thought about every person who'd ever been bullied into silence by someone with more power, every employee who'd swallowed their objections because fighting back seemed impossible. We go to trial, she said. Adrian smiled. Yeah? Yeah. Let's finish this. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Natalie had to testify for 2 full days. Victoria's lawyers tried everything to discredit her. They brought up her financial struggles, suggesting she'd been desperate enough to lie. They questioned her qualifications, implying she'd been hired for reasons other than merit. They painted her as vindictive, ambitious, willing to destroy someone's career to advance her own. But Natalie had learned something over the past 8 months. She'd learned that honesty, delivered calmly and consistently, was more powerful than any story someone else tried to tell about her. She answered every question truthfully. She admitted when she didn't know something. She refused to exaggerate or embellish. She just told the truth, exactly as it had happened. And when Victoria took the stand and tried to spin a story about being targeted for her high standards and commitment to excellence, the jury didn't buy it. The security footage didn't lie. The IT logs didn't lie. The pattern of behavior documented by former employees didn't lie. The verdict came back in 4 hours. The jury found in favor of Sterling Global and Natalie Hayes on all counts. They awarded Victoria nothing and recommended sanctions against her legal team for filing a frivolous lawsuit. Natalie was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She sat next to Adrian, holding her breath, waiting for the words that would finally end this. When the jury foreman said, "In favor of the defendants," Natalie felt something break open in her chest. She'd won. They'd won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Adrian made a brief statement about integrity and accountability. Natalie said nothing, just stood there feeling like she could finally breathe again. That night, Adrian insisted on taking her and her team out to celebrate. They ended up at the same diner where he'd taken her 9 months ago, eating pancakes at midnight and laughing about things that weren't that funny but felt hilarious anyway. Marcus got drunk and gave a speech about how Natalie was the most stubborn person he'd ever met in the best way possible. Priya cried happy tears. James posted a photo to social media that went viral. Natalie just sat there, surrounded by people who'd fought for her, feeling more grateful than she could put into words. Adrian drove her home around 2 a.m. They sat in his car outside her building, neither one of them moving to leave. "You did it," he said finally. "We did it." "No, you did. I just backed you up." Natalie looked at him, at this man who'd taken a chance on her based on one honest conversation, who'd trusted her when no one else would, who'd fought for her even when it cost him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "Don't." Adrian's voice was rough. "You changed my company. You changed my life. I should be thanking you." "For what?" "For reminding me what matters, for being brave when I wasn't, for—" He stopped, looked at her, really looked at her, and then he kissed her. It was gentle, careful, like he was giving her every opportunity to pull away. Natalie didn't pull away. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to his jaw, feeling the stubble there, the warmth of his skin. It felt like something inevitable, like something she'd been moving toward since the night of the gala without realizing it. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "That was probably a mistake," he said. "Probably. You work for me." "I know. This complicates everything." "I know. But I've wanted to do that for months." Natalie smiled. "I know." He pulled back slightly, searching her face. "What do we do?" "I don't know, but I think we figure it out together." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They sat there for another minute, the silence comfortable and charged all at once. Then Natalie got out of the car and Adrian drove away, and Natalie went up to her apartment feeling like her entire life had just shifted on its axis again. She wasn't sure what happened next, but for the first time in her life, that didn't scare her. The months that followed were messy in the best way. Natalie and Adrian tried to keep things professional at work. They mostly failed. Little things gave them away. The way he looked at her in meetings, the way she smiled when he texted, the fact that she started spending more time at his apartment, sharing dinners with him and Emma, becoming part of their routine without officially acknowledging it. People noticed. Of course they noticed. But here's the thing about proving yourself through 8 months of fighting for something real. People respected Natalie enough not to reduce her to who she was dating. The Transparency Initiative spoke for itself. The results spoke for themselves. 6 months after the trial, Sterling Global won a major industry award for corporate accountability. Natalie accepted it on behalf of her team, giving a speech about how change was possible when people chose honesty over comfort. The applause was genuine, The respect was earned. A year after that, Natalie was promoted to VP of Corporate Integrity. She built out her team, established new standards, trained other companies on how to implement real transparency. The work was hard. It never stopped being hard. But it mattered. Emma turned 10. She stopped drawing Natalie as a superhero and started drawing her as just Natalie, which somehow meant more. She asked one night if Natalie was going to be her stepmom. Natalie and Adrian hadn't talked about marriage, but the question didn't feel as scary as it should have. Natalie's relationship with her mom got better. They talked weekly. Her mom visited and met Adrian and told Natalie she was proud of her so many times that Natalie started to believe it. And one night, 2 years after everything started, Natalie stood on Adrian's balcony watching the city lights and realized something. She was happy. Not perfect. Not without problems or stress or moments of doubt, but genuinely, deeply happy in a way she'd never thought possible. Adrian came out to join her, handing her a glass of wine like he had so many times before. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far I've come. How different my life is." "Better different?" "Yeah, terrifying, but better." He smiled. "I'll take terrifying and better." They stood there in comfortable silence, and Natalie thought about the woman she'd been at that gala. The one who'd been so convinced that staying invisible was the same as staying safe. The one who'd thought honesty was a luxury she couldn't afford. That woman felt like a stranger now. "You know what I learned?" Natalie said. "What?" "That the truth doesn't make things easier. It makes them harder. But it makes them real. And real is better than safe." Adrian looked at her, his expression soft. "When did you get so wise?" "When I stopped trying to disappear." He kissed her temple, and Natalie leaned into him, feeling solid and grounded and exactly where she belonged. Emma called from inside that dinner was ready. They went in together, and Natalie helped set the table while Emma talked about her day, and Adrian burned the garlic bread, but nobody cared. It was ordinary. Beautifully, perfectly ordinary. And Natalie realized that this was what she'd been looking for all along. Not perfection, not wealth, or power, or recognition. Just a life where she didn't have to hide who she was, where honesty was valued, where she mattered. She'd found it in the last place she expected, in a company that was broken until she helped fix it, in a man who'd seen her at her most honest and valued her for it, in a little girl who'd decided Natalie was worth drawing pictures for. The mistake she'd made at that gala, the conversation that was supposed to destroy her career, had actually saved her life. Not because it led to success or money or a happy ending tied up with a bow, but because it forced her to stop hiding, to stand up, to fight for something real. And in doing that, she discovered who she actually was. Someone brave, someone honest, someone who didn't need a cape to be a hero, just someone who refused to settle for less than the truth. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.